would it be like to have her in my bedroom and chat her up or something?
Steady on, Martin. Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video, and today I'm delighted to be joined by a very special guest, the vinyl scavenger himself, Mr. Martin Parrott. Hello, Martin.
Hello, hi, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for joining me for this one. So this video, it's going to be a bit different, this one. We're going to be talking about all-time favourite artists, and we're going to be discussing how it is that you know when an artist or a band is your favourite. This topic has interested me for a long time. Other people don't seem to have a problem with this thing. This is my favourite artist. And as we get into the video, I'm going to be talking about the fact that I do struggle. Now, unfortunately, I've got a little preamble. I'm going to talk about a few quite quickly. Do you have something similar? Because we've each chosen three of our top artists, and we're going to go 3, 2, 1. Do you want to talk about any of your also rans before I quickly do my also rans?
There was 3 bands, late 80s I liked, all with blonde singers. So there was a slightly embarrassing transition band. Then there was Primitives, and then there was Darling Buds, and all that sort of little pop, retro 60s, punky sort of thing I was a bit into, and all those bands I loved. And then when, I suppose first it was Manchester came along, then I was a sucker for that and fell for all that, so all the usual bands in that. I suppose if I had to pick out anybody, maybe in Spiral Carpets, and then at this time I was working in a record shop, so then I went sucker for grunge, and it was the usual sort of Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and then I also liked sub poppy sort of things. Young Fresh Fellows was a band on Sub Pop that I liked a lot, and they are sort of another sort of poppy, jangly sort of band. Anything before 1988 is embarrassing, is what I'm going to talk about soon. Will prove. Yeah, I think that's sort of about all I want to cover.
It's interesting how you use the expression fell for and then you said sucker. It's almost like when you look back through your life, it's almost like your current self almost sees your younger self as almost being duped into thinking that these artists were your favourite. Is that how you feel about them now? As time wears on, do you look back and go, how on earth was that my favourite artist? I don't get that now. I don't understand what it was about them that I loved so much.
I think it was obvious, really. They were blonde and that sort of age, and the cat's here.
I'll just whiz through some of mine then, and then we can both be on the same page. I mean, I'm going to go backwards in time. Actually, just before we start, I just want to say really quickly do something, and that's just mention the Beatles, okay?
Yeah.
And all I'm going to say is I'm taking them out of the running. Just because they could easily be my favourite, but I just find that the Beatles are so huge, and everybody, well, not everybody, but I mean, you know, lots of people acknowledge their importance and their vastness, and I just feel that, for me personally, saying that the Beatles is my favourite band, it's almost, what's the point? So I'm going to just not have them. That's not to say that there won't be a member of the Beatles, though, coming into the list.
Oh, right, okay. Well, that's interesting.
But, so just going backwards from now, backwards in time, my current favourite band is Bebop Deluxe. If you'd have asked me maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I might have said John Martin. If you'd asked me maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I might have said Steely Dan, who I became really obsessed with. This bunch come and go a little bit for me. I know you're not a big fan, but Prefab Sprout, this band really kept me going at university. I had a broken heart. This music is perfect for English undergraduates with broken hearts. That's exactly what I was at the time. This was the ultimate expression of who I was and how I was feeling. And if you'd have asked me, I'd have said them. Going back a couple of years before then, I had a major fetish for Thomas Dolby. Listened to him all the time. Just became totally addicted to his music. This guy I've followed through his career ever since this record, which I picked up in 1987, I think, when it came out, and I've bought every single record he's released since. Heading back into teenage years now, major Jeff Lynne and ELO fan. 10cc, quite similar. Goes back to my kind of earliest musical memories. Same for the Buggles.
Did you sort of get into those bands at the time, or has it been building up over time? Because I mean, the Prefab Sprout you said was very personal, sort of certain time in your life.
Yeah, I'd say most of the time. I mean, this is the discussion we're having, I guess. It's not just who is our favourite band or artist; it's why do they become that. And I'd say, most of those artists was just a thing where it was just I latched onto it because of some kind of emotional attachment, and then it snowballed from there. And things become addictive, I think, like Steely Dan, where you finally tap into something and then you want to just hear more of it, and you want to hear more of it, and you want to just really understand what it is about that music that you love. So you keep listening to it to try. It's almost like you're trying to process it, you're trying to understand it, you're trying to internalize it, and eventually it's like you do sort of pop out the other end in a way. And sometimes you don't need to listen to that artist again because you've done the work and it's been, and it's time to move on. What I'm interested in talking about is who are the bands or artists who transcend all of that.
Okay, James, my number 5 is Beatles. Now, I came to the Beatles late, I would say. My mum had a couple of early albums. My getting into the Beatles really came from Paul McCartney because I bought Frog Chorus, I bought No More Lonely Nights, I even bought Spies Like Us on 7-inch single. So Paul McCartney, and then getting the All the Best compilation. And he was always around, wasn't he, then, Paul McCartney? And he had this, do you remember, did you ever buy Smash Hits?
No.
They called him Wacky Thumbs Aloft. So he was probably the first sort of serious musician I was into and liked. And then I think at some point, probably many years after you got into McCartney Beatles, but probably by the end of the 80s, I got into Beatles because I wasn't that aware of them at the time, I don't think. Yeah, so I think Beatles is my number 5.
Okay.
It wouldn't be higher. I saw Paul McCartney in Helsinki when I lived in Finland, and that was probably about 10 years ago. I think it was when he'd done a bad Hyde Park gig or something. But that night, he was really good, actually. He was really good, really fun. I suppose all my artists they all have quite a bit of longevity and durability about them. So if I've liked them when I'm young, and they've still kept going, even if they've tried different things, I think, most of them.
I think that is a common thread through my top ones as well, is, these artists that stick around for a long time and therefore you grow with them and you're able to carry on buying their records, and the emotional attachment therefore becomes stronger over time. I mean, you've surprised me there, Martin. You told me that you were surprised at me not having the Beatles in my list at all, and now I'm surprised at you for having them, because I've never picked up from your videos at all a love for the Beatles. Never. That's slightly blown my mind.
Yeah, I don't listen to them a huge amount, but yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Well, I was going to do 4, but I'll quickly do my number 5, and then, because I did forget to show something, and that's this album on CD. This is Beck Imitations. So I do need to include Beck, because in the 90s, I'd say for at least 3 years, I was obsessed with him. I picked up on him just after the album, is it Mellow Gold, the album with Loser on, and that just blew my mind, And then it was Odelay, and then it was this one. And then it cooled down then for a while. I did go back to Beck later on, but if you'd have asked me back in the 90s, who is it? Who's the kingpin? Who's the person who's drawing everything together? It was definitely Beck. And I think the reason for that is that I'd never been into what you might call cool music before, I'd always been a bit kind of like Wings and just things that were not particularly, credible. And I'd never liked hip hop or anything like that. But when I heard Loser by Beck, he found a way of melding all this sort of contemporary street sounding 90s stuff that was around with the Beatles, with just a great sense of melody. And I found it really refreshing because it was in the middle of all that Britpop thing. And I never really got into Britpop. I quite like Blur, but I was never into the whole, Oasis, Sleeper, all those bands. It was all a bit, I found it a bit derivative. And I think Beck was very refreshing in the sense he seemed to be a genuinely original voice. And I found a lot of emotion came through in his work. I knew people who didn't like Beck because they saw him as being almost a sort of superficial pop artist, really, doing very kind of postmodern, ironic, almost like, one eyebrow raised kind of music. But I actually got a lot from him in terms of his melodies, and his lyrics were fantastic. It always seemed to me like he was writing about my life in his words. His words, it was this kind of constant stream of kind of surreal poetry, and his words were full of all the detritus of modern life and all these weird images. But it almost, I mean, I was living a fairly chaotic life myself, at the time, shall we say, and it just spoke to me. I went off him when I realised that he was into all this new Scientology stuff. And
is he?
And I read a couple of interviews about him not being a particularly nice person to be around, and it sort of put me off. And his music, I did go off his music for a bit, but I would have to include him in the list because, like I said, in the 90s, if you'd have asked me, I'd have just said, yeah, Beck. Beck is my all-time favourite for certain.
I mean, I really like Loser as a single, yeah. And I don't think I've ever looked into his stuff that much, to be honest. Okay, number 4, right.
Yeah.
Well, this is a little bit chronological, I suppose, in a way. So my number 4 was the first person I mean, I must have been mad to have bought this at the time. So this is the Royal Box by Madonna.
Right.
Slightly dated, but I was very into Madonna, teenage years, you know. And well, it was that whole, I suppose, sort of, you know, what would it be like to have her in my bedroom and chat her up or something? And look at all this here.
Steady on, Martin.
Yeah. Look at these VHS video here that nobody's ever going to watch ever again, probably. She was very good, Madonna, at controversy. But she was very good at searching herself, because I don't really think she really knows who she is. And so I know she's one of these people, you could say, dabbles in different religions or different theories and stuff, and that she also, does she really take things off the street, like styles of music? She's been there and hung on.
Yeah.
I don't know that I agree with her entirely on everything, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I know quite a few people, as in, you know, men of our age who were really into Madonna. She totally passed me by in the 80s. I think I was too busy watching Doctor Who at that point. I do sort of get it. I used to have a Madonna best of CD, and I actually moved it on because I wasn't really listening to it, and I figured I don't need to listen to Madonna because I can hear her on the radio anytime. It's that kind of thing, you know. I was completely aware of your Madonna enthusiasm.
I saw her twice at Wembley.
Right.
The old Wembley Stadium, yeah. Second time she came down on a pole, girly show tour, I think, and the first time I saw was before that. So was it Blonde Ambition? I'm not sure. I mean, I've still got the tickets.
Yeah.
Somewhere in my book of tickets. Yeah. So
cool. Well, my next choice, my number 4, is nothing like as glamorous as.
Oh, right.
Now, I should just stress from here on, you know, I'm terrible at lists. I'm terrible at ordering things, album rankings, anything like that. So as we get into my top 4, I do need to stress to yourself and to the viewers that this list could move around. You know, on a different day, things could have moved. But I am going to put Pink Floyd at number 4.
Yeah.
If you'd have asked me at the age of 16, 17, favourite band, greatest band ever, I would have definitely said Pink Floyd. I mean, I've been aware of them ever since I was a kid. When Brick in the Wall Part 2 came out in 79, it was number 1. The crucial thing for me that happened, and I guess this will be, I would imagine this is going to be something which is going to chime with other people, in that it was my first show.
Oh, right, okay.
I was 16 and I went to see the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour in Manchester Main Road, and this is Pink Floyd we're talking about now, so we're talking about the full-on works, you know, incredible stage show, you know, like beds crashing into the stage, enormous inflatable pigs with laser beam eyes gliding over the audience's heads, huge firework display at the end, and the music was powerful. It was a really powerful experience. And when you're 16, that has got to have an effect. Seeing Pink Floyd that day, my first ever show, and they were such legendary musicians even back then. You know, they were just they'd come from the 60s. They were around at the same time as the Beatles. They'd had all this legacy with the Syd Barrett story and all the complex back history and everything. And to me, they seemed to me like figures from history. Even then, they were like, this is a band that's going to be around in the history books for like 100 years after I'm dead. And I'm in the stadium watching them play. So, yeah, I mean, the reason I wouldn't put them at number 1 anymore, and I have talked about this on my channel as well, is that I do think they went very gloomy and cynical and depressing. And I still can't listen to The Wall. The Wall was my favourite album of all time at one point when I was kind of 16, 17. But arguably, that's sort of what The Wall was meant to be, wasn't it? It was almost like put together deliberately to be the favourite album of a whole generation of 16 and 17-year-olds who were then hopefully going to grow out of it, which I did, I think. But I think they would have to be in my top 5, certainly. I mean, they could move to 3, they could move to 2. I don't think I would put them at number 1 on a different day, but I'm quite happy with them being at 4.
Actually, I think now you've mentioned them, I could have had them in my top 5, but
okay.
I've got the Beatles. But I think 70s stuff I like. I'm definitely with you on The Wall. I never got into The Wall.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, funny thing is, I was born in a similar area, or probably the same area, whether it would have been a school catchment area, from another Brick in the Wall, the kids on the single. Oh, right. So I could have. I have sometimes think I could have been on a Pink Floyd single. It's possible. I'm not guaranteeing it, but anyway. Right, my number 3 band is a 90s band got quite a lot of records by them piled up here. So it's Manic Street Preachers.
Okay.
Another band where, like Pink Floyd, one of the four main members sort of disappeared. Still no idea what happened there, really. I sometimes think about him.
He was meant to have jumped from a bridge, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. He left his car there just before we were about to tour America. I mean, I remember going to Manics as often as I could at gigs, and even borrowing someone's white jeans to complete my look. Maybe I had eyeliner once, I can't remember. But I suppose a lot of it was the lyrics. They were punchy, brash at that time when I was a little bit punchy and brash. There's a promo there with Slash and Burn. This single I thought was brilliant. Didn't like the original song. I hope this isn't going to just turn into me showing lots of records.
No,
But,
it's
I
fine.
suppose this shows you how much I was into them.
Yeah.
And I knew the Sony rep as well. Somewhere I had a Slash and Burn lighter.
Right.
What happened to it? I've no idea. Somewhere I still have dog tags, Street Preachers dog tags, the things they tried to get to make Manics famous, popular. That's the first album. I always thought this second one was better in quite a lot of ways, actually. It's definitely a bit more darker, starting to talk about issues of maybe more male issues, I guess. But by the third album, obviously there's songs that are going to shock some people. And yeah, there's a whole incident with him, with Richie carving his arm and everything. And yeah. And by this time he'd gone, the fourth album. So,
and it was only after he went, really, that they became what you might describe as a household name. I mean, that album was massive, wasn't it? I think in the 90s, there was that period where a handful of bands just seemed to just come to the fore. And they became one of the most sort of inescapable bands. I mean, you just couldn't turn on any TV program seeing the Manics doing A Design for Life. And indie rock, it seemed to have just really, really taken off in a big way, and it had become mainstream. It was still sort of edgy. It still had that kind of, I guess you describe it as post-punk, most broadly speaking. It still had that kind of indie drive to it, scuzzy kind of sound. But it had become mainstream. It had become big money. And I saw the Manics. I saw them at a festival, some festival or other. I can't quite remember. So I mean, clearly a major figure on the landscape of 90s rock music. So cool.
Yeah, I'm not so into them now, though.
Okay.
I know they've just done an album this year. And, not on the radar really for me so much.
Well, my number three, I'm genuinely not going to talk about them for long because I have gone on about them quite a lot on the channel, but I can't not have them in.
No, you can't.
This is Queen Live Killers, which came out in 1979, and I bought it when it came out. The first live album I'd ever heard, therefore the first live rock music I'd ever heard, years before I went to a concert. So obviously you can hear the crowd on the record, and you can hear Freddie doing his showmanship to the audience, and the way I could hear the way that the music was different to the studio albums. So and that was fascinating to me, the fact that you could listen to a song like I don't know, say Now I'm Here, which is on the third studio album.
Yeah.
In this record, he turns it into like a 20-minute epic on side 2.
Oh, right.
His audience reaction, and it's just incredible. Queen just created a world or a universe or an environment in which my imagination was just let loose. Queen had more mystique than either of the two artists that I've got above. And it was the mystique, it was the mystery of them. It was the mystery of their image and their music and what they sang about and how they put the music together. I mean, Sheer Heart Attack, the album Sheer Heart Attack with that first track, Brighton Rock, I can't even describe how it blew my mind.
Where every time you hear it, something like that, do you still get hairs on the, well, I haven't got many hairs on the back of my neck, but you know what I mean? Certain things and memories and...
Just the visceral power of the performances and the music and the way they played together, I find just so thrilling. The fact that, I mean, they were so like meshed.
Yeah.
More meshed than any other band I've ever heard. I mean, Taylor and Deacon, this, it was almost like one mind, really. It was like a Gestalt kind of entity. Queen were this thing. They were these four guys who discovered something, or they'd made something together, and they were just so focused and so on the same page as each other. And just so powerful, that was the thing. Powerful drums, powerful guitars, powerful singing, the whole thing swept me away, essentially. I can't imagine my sort of musical universe without them. They're just such a cornerstone.
I mean, the fact that they're called Queen, they're going to be pretty substantial, aren't they? I mean, one track I really like, I don't know about the whole album, but I really like the track Innuendo. I just thought it was a great chasm of a track.
You know, the 80s are problematic and they're not as good as the 70s, but it's not like they went down the toilet. I mean, they still kept doing songs. It's just that they went a bit 1980s. That was the thing with them. But the album The Works has always been very special to me. I mean, that got me through my grandfather's death. I mean, he was the first grandparent I lost, and it was a real sort of apocalypse in the family at the time, you know, to lose the first grandparent.
Yeah.
14, 15, it's a big deal, you know, and that record really kept me going through that whole, you know, period. And I could name check, you know, a dozen Queen songs straight off that have very specific memories attached to them, or very, you know, specific things that would make them special to me. But yeah, anyway. So number 2, Martin.
Number 2.
Yeah.
With number 2 already. God, right, number 2. Okay, so they were formed in northern Finland in 1996, I think, by this guy called Tuomas Holopainen. So they're called Nightwish. So this is in the realm of, I suppose, prog melodic metal, power metal, do they sometimes call it? I think really you have to listen to it to see what you think, and then you can like judge it for yourself, really.
Is the band called Nightwish?
The band is called Nightwish. Right. Yeah. So they've been through 3. They're on their 3rd female singer. So basically, there's guys that play instruments with a woman, usually quite striking woman with very expansive octaves. Yeah, that's not a double entendre.
Well, you're going to say something else then, Martin.
Yeah, to sing sort of very, sometimes quite poppy, catchy songs, to be honest, but then sometimes very long, elongated stories, elaborate. I don't want to say it's like all myths and legends and all that kind of, you know, Scando, troll, Moomin-like meanderings. I mean, my wife is from Finland, so I suppose that is part of it. I had actually been to see them before I met her, but the songs are there. The songs are there. And this is an album called Auri, which is more Scandinavian and Celtic folk-based. So Tuomas Holopainen sings with his wife, and this other guy called Troy Donockley, who plays a lot of Celtic pipes and things. Here's another album he did. Apparently he was a big fan of this comic by Don Rosa. It's called Scrooge McDuck. So that's Donald Duck's cousin. Done an album based on the life and times, or the stories and comics of Scrooge McDuck. The guy's done the illustrations for him there.
How many years have you been into this band, Martin? Is this going back a long time?
A little bit, yeah. Before I met my wife, so it would be about 2005, 2006, I suppose. Yeah, so actually quite a long time. There's another album by them there. I suppose they're sort of, it's just an incredible live band. They are very humanistic, I would say. But there's definitely, he's this sort of guy, this Tuomas Holopainen guy, who's put his hand to a lot of things. He could easily go into film music, and I would have thought anything he could have a go at. They did have a go at Eurovision once. I just listened to them. They're very easy to listen to be honest. And they're quite heavy. Yeah, I suppose they're quite heavy. There's a few growler bands that I do like a little bit of.
Well, that was an interesting choice for number 2. I didn't see that one coming.
No, good.
It's making me feel like my number 2 choices are a bit boring, really. But they don't have any sort of, you know, Norwegian prog or anything in my list.
Not up your sleeve today.
Okay, well, my number 2, again, this could have come number 1, and, you know, this will come as no surprise to anybody. I'm going to put Squeeze at number 2.
Squeeze.
Now, Squeeze sort of are my favourite band of all time, really, and this goes back to this thing of, you know, where you grow up with a band. So they sort of took me through primary school, secondary school, sixth form college, university, post-university life, into married life. Well, I'm not married, but, you know, into
settled status,
settled life, yeah,
settled relationships.
What was interesting back in the day, you know, between 78 and 82, what Squeeze did was that their music matured. So they started out as this very kind of, almost like a sort of puerile, you know, nudge wink humour. Benny Hill,
Muscles from a Shell.
Yeah, you know, give the dog a bone, that kind of thing. But the 5th album, they'd really matured, and they were starting to write about quite dark themes, and their music was growing up. And I've got this really clear memory of being about 11 and just about to go to secondary school. And I used to imagine myself as what I was going to look like when I was about, you know, whatever, 25 or something.
Yeah.
And the picture I had of myself was very clearly Glenn Tilbrook, circa 1982, because he started wearing these quite nice white suits. and he had his hair like sort of 80s crimped by this time, you know.
Yeah.
He was trying to look a bit glamorous, and I had this very clear picture of myself walking around in this white suit.
The white suit.
Or,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah, why not?
You know, when you're a kid, you think, what sort of man am I going to turn into? What kind of adult am I going to be? And you try and form a picture of yourself. And it was, to me, it was just, well, hopefully I'll look like Glenn Tilbrook does now. It was really that sweet and innocent, really. You know, I mean, unfortunately, it didn't come to pass, but they grew with me. Their music became more mature and more sensible in a way as I was maturing. Their music was moving from being this slapstick puerile thing into being something that was more mature and more, you know, melancholy. So it fit perfectly. And then they came to play at university. When I went to uni in '89, they came and played at the Freshers' Ball, you know, in the second week. And that was when, you know, they had Jules Holland in the lineup. And yeah, I mean, it was just totally mind blowing, really. So yeah, they could come number one. I had to put my top artist at one, in all honesty, but Squeeze could well be it. So anyway, number two, Squeeze.
Yeah.
So your number one choice, Martin, I know what it is already.
Yeah, I can guess what yours might be, but I'm not 100%.
I did give you a clue earlier as to what it was going to be.
Oh, I wasn't listening properly, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll just go for it then and relieve everybody. Right.
Yeah. Oh. Go for it.
It's not Lip Up Fatty by Bad Manners. You know, when he does it on bare-bellied on top of the Pops or whatever. Right. Now, my number one is The Church, who you may or may not have heard of. Certainly some people that do videos on YouTube, they have heard of The Church. First time I ever saw The Church might have been my first gig, I'm not sure. So it was 1991, and I think I saw them twice in about a month in London. The Church were the main band. I don't know whether I heard much by them, to be honest, but it was a mate that was very into them. So my group of mates, we went to see them with him. And they had a Gold Afternoon Fix album out, and we completely destroyed and stole all of the display that they had in the reception of the gig. We took it all with us, all staples and all and everything, back on the London Underground. So we must have liked it. I don't think we were just being stupid, like sort of 17, 18-year-olds or whatever. That album, at the time, I loved. Yeah, I loved it because it was the first thing I heard by them. And then I had to work my way back through their catalogue, which went back to 1980. This is the first single by The Church, Unguarded Moments, with a nice B-side, only available on there, Bus Driver. First album has this sort of similar cover. This one is just self-titled, I think. This one is called Of Skins and Heart. They're exactly the same, but this one has Fighter Pilot Korean War on it. So this is very chuggy, poppy, post-punk, maybe. Would you describe it as, I guess? They always have been compared to REM, The Byrds, and
I hear The Cure.
Yeah, maybe The Cure, yeah, that sort of thing, yeah.
A little bit of, well, I hear a little bit of Lloyd Cole and the Commotions in them.
Yeah, in the voice especially, yeah.
It's got that kind of, well, even though they're not English, obviously they're Australian, but it's almost like they've got an English melancholy to their sound.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
It seems to sort of conjure up bedsit worlds, doesn't it? And young people going through sort of turbulent emotional times. It's that classic Cure thing. It's sort of young people's music, but it's done in a very intelligent literary way. And the guitars are really nice. I like the production on the Church records that I've heard. It's got that slight sort of boomy sound to it, which came from the 80s, but the guitars are interesting to listen to. They're kind of textured and they do seem to be very listenable.
Well, they're real craftsmen, I think, really, of the songs. I mean, as it happens, I suppose as they've gone on, they've become more experimental. And I suppose the main reason they became experimental, that was the second album, which is like, so when I went to this gig, they've sort of started doing a whole album, you know, these bands that do a whole album for a gig sort of thing. So they've sort of started doing that a bit more. And then there's a couple of albums here. This was the Grail that I was looking for ages, and then I found a record fair for a £5.
Okay.
There's like a sing-songs EP. It's not that rare, but it was quite difficult for me to find, you know. it's the greatest mullets in town with paisley shirts. So this was, I think they'd gone to America by this time. Go-betweens tried to live in Britain, didn't they? And that didn't really work out in a way. So Church went to Australia. They did this album. Then they did Starfish with Under the Milky Way on it. And then they did this album. Now, it was probably around this sort of time, but I hope in the comments below or whatever that people will say whether this is true or not. But Steve Kilbey did an album with Grant McClellan, The Church called Jack Frost, which is an excellent album.
From the Go-Betweens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would recommend that. There they are. They were drug dependents, I don't know, or drug friends, or, not sure. But this was the third album they had on the major label, on Arista BMG, 1992. This is the one when I think they started to realise that maybe they wanted to do what they wanted to do, but also they weren't really going to have another hit. I don't think they were anyway. I didn't think they were. So they did what they wanted to do, and I think this is probably their best album. I know many people put it at the top of their lists, and the image is very striking. And I suppose this sort of sums up a lot of Steve Kilbey's songwriting now. It's definitely a searching for the ethereal, searching for spirituality. Yeah, the Church of, I think, it was that time of my life when I was so into music, probably that time. And yeah, they're just, I would say they're my number one band.
You've spoken to me about the Church before, and I anticipated, I think, some of what you were going to say, in that it's that kind of, that classic period of your life where you've got a friendship circle, a social scene, and you discover a band together, and it becomes part of your life, doesn't it? All right, Martin. Well, thanks for sharing your number one, and it's cool that it is still your number one. And I think you're probably more clear-cut and convinced in your mind about your number one, because as you'll have noticed, I keep saying this could have been my number one. So you've got to take mine with a slight pinch of salt. But I couldn't, in all honesty, this is what it is today anyway, so I'm just going to put McCartney at number one.
No, that's fine. I thought it was him. No worries.
So, with the proviso that the Beatles are kind of, even though they're not in my list, it's like my list exists in the world that the Beatles created. So, I mean, McCartney was the first musician whose records I bought. This album in particular, I must have listened to this more than any other record in my collection. I had it on tape. I bought the cassette. My first Sony Walkman, I think it was a Sanyo Walkman, rather than Sony Walkman. Sanyo Walkman. But this record, I think I was about 12 when this came out, and I just listened to it obsessively. And there's a fair few McCartney albums that I can say that I did that with, London Town, Band on the Run. They're kind of internalized. They're part of my DNA. They're part of my musical inner landscape. My only sort of slight drawback with McCartney that did slightly question whether I would put him at number one is that he has done stuff that I don't like. And ever since Linda McCartney died, I haven't been that into him as a person, as a thing. When I see Paul McCartney on TV now, I usually switch off, which is quite sad.
Really. Oh, right, yeah. That is quite sad, yeah.
Yeah, I don't really listen to his radio interviews. I tend to avoid too much exposure to him because I think, like most people, find him a bit annoying. Find he's just become a caricature of himself. Some people are really into the music he makes nowadays. It doesn't do much for me. I have liked a couple of his more recent albums, but I wish I could say the same about McCartney that, say, Richard McCook would say about David Bowie.
Yeah.
Where it's this thing like, he's definitely my number one. I can happily collect everything. That's not me and McCartney anymore. But if I take my life as a whole stretch of time, and if I ask myself, how much time have I spent listening and enjoying McCartney's music compared to any other artist, he probably would come out number one. Like just literally just counting the hours of enjoyment, because he's been around for, ever since I became aware of what pop music was. My first ever record was an EP of Pinky and Perky singing She Loves You, All My Loving, and Can't Buy Me Love. And I was about 3. And All My Loving still makes me cry when I hear it.
Yeah.
It just takes me back to being almost the youngest memory that I can find, really, listening to Pinky and Perky singing a Paul McCartney song. And it made me cry when I was 3, and it still makes me cry now. So, there's obviously an emotional connection there, which can't
Yeah,
be
I think
denied.
you've got quite a lot of emotional connections to certain bits of music and what you've
Hmm.
spoken to me about before. I tend to remember the times. I don't know where my emotions are sometimes.
Hmm.
Sort of maybe a bit deeper down. I don't know. I mean, I'm not surprised Paul McCartney was your number one at
Hmm.
all. I thought it was going to be that, but
Yeah.
in a way, I've come a full loop really because my first sort of records
Hmm.
were Paul McCartney, although they were his uncoolest period. So I used to really like. I have the album with No More Lonely Nights on it. A few Beatles covers on there, isn't there?
Well,
From a
strangely enough,
strange film.
Headley, another fat beard in
Yeah,
Talking About Records, his favourite McCartney album, I think, is also Give My Regards to Broad Street.
that is correct.
And he likes those sort of early 80s McCartney albums where he'd basically fallen off the critical radar and people were slanging him off and kicking him and saying he was useless.
Mm,
And to me, that kind of shows the greatness of McCartney, really, is that even when he was making the frog chorus and everybody was taking
yeah,
the piss out of him, he was making new fans as he was doing that. So to me, it's like you can kick McCartney as much as you want, you can slag him off, you can accuse him of being
yeah,
arrogant. He's Paul McCartney at the end of the day, the most successful songwriter that ever lived, probably.
mm,
His reputation rides before him. So,
mm.
having said that, obviously, I don't like everything he's done. All right, folks. Well, thanks for watching, and hope you found that interesting. Do leave a comment down below. Let us know who is your favourite artist of all time, or are you more like myself and racked with doubt, or are you more like Martin and very, very clear in his mind and in his heart that the Church are number one? So thanks for joining me, Martin. That was a pleasure.
It was good. It was great. Yeah.
And thanks to everybody for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.